Hello guys, I wanted to talk with you today somewhat broadly about the growing annexation and persecution of the Palestinians in the West Bank under in Israel, and the way that world media has been discussing it, or in many cases not discussing it at all, and the United States general avoidance of the subject matter. So so the West Bank, of course, is this small patch of land that used to belong to Palestine and is a landlocked area. It's landlocked by the greater Israel, the territory of Israel, which is not a very large country itself. It's a very small country. The West Bank has been in occupation since 1967. I believe it was called the 3 Days War, and it was home to 2.5 million Palestinians, with varying levels of military and control and government control. And over the years, there's been movement, and there's been Jewish people have been moving into the West Bank, and more of the West Bank has been becoming occupied by Jews. When that land was occupied by Palestinians and continues to be occupied by Palestinians who are trapped within the Israeli state in their own kind of exclusive zone. Now, I'm no expert about this, but it doesn't take a very difficult examination to see that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians has been messed up for years, in the way the West, and particularly the United States, has been complicit in this behavior and turned a blind eye, or worse, actually been, the United States has been giving $3 to $4 billion in aid to the state of Israel for at least the last 10 years. The state of Israel, fun fact, the state of Israel is actually the largest recipient of U.S. funds of any foreign government cumulatively since World War II. Israel has received more money than any other nation from the United States, which shows in the fact that they have been very aggressive towards the Palestinians and other Arab states. They're one of the 7 nuclear states with nuclear weapons. They have anti-nuclear weapon systems. I think the only country in the world that has an anti-nuclear weapon system. I think it's lasers or something that they have. So they're, and we're in bed with them so deep, and of course there's even laws that have been proposed, and perhaps some have even been passed in our country that have on the federal level. I know that they've pushed for it to be for government funds to be able to be pulled from a company if they in turn use if they use boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. If a company chooses to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel, then in turn our government can then withhold funds from them. So anti-BDS laws have been commonplace in the United States now, sadly, unfortunately, because what Israel does is a crime it's an international crime, and it's terrible that we are in bed with them. But back to the story here. That was just a little context for you. So this is from the TRT World, which is a Turkish state-ran media. They say that since Trump in January of 2020, he passed something called the Peace to Prosperity vision to improve the lives of the Palestinian and Israeli people. This law, which people have criticized, saying that this is a green light for further annexation and persecution of the Palestinians. And of course, I don't remember ever hearing anything about it. So this kind of stuff doesn't get covered in our media. So from the National Herald of India, they say parts of the occupied to be occupied in the West Bank have been referred to by Israeli extremists by biblical names such as Judea and Samaria. So there are people. The Israeli state is filled with. It's a very right wing state. It's Netanyahu. Their leader has been particularly hostile, and he's backed by people like this who want to return to who were upset from the get go when they didn't receive enough land back around the time of World War II or whatever. I think it was like 1947 when Israel was made a state. These guys have been pissed or their parents and grandparents have been pissed that they didn't get enough land, and they'd love for this to be what they call 2,000 years ago Judea and Samaria to be returned under the Jewish state. And the National Herald India also says that this is a clear violation of international law. The EU has been considering sanctions and pulling science funding. Apparently, the EU sends hundreds of millions of dollars each year, a total of at least $1 billion in the last 3 years for science research to to Israel. The EU sends science research funding to Israel, so they've been talking about putting more sanctions against them and stuff like that, which I think is a great idea. And then Haaretz, I hope that's probably pronounced it. Haaretz is a news source, the oldest news source in Israel. They say that crowds of Palestinian. The goal here is to crowd Palestinians into what they call Banustans, which is a term that has gone back to the days of apartheid with South Africa. But these Banustans, pack them into Banustans so West Bank can be annexed by Israel for cheap real estate. And they say also that the media stays silent. The reason the media has been silent on this is largely not because of their fear of persecution or arrest, but because it willingly accepts the official lie. So what they're saying here is they're not worried about government crackdowns on the media necessarily, as much as they're saying that this is actually just simply that nearly all media in Israel simply believes the story that they just swallow the story that they're fed, and they're complicit by their silence in this kind of event that they're evicting Palestinians out of the West Bank, or crowding them into smaller and smaller pockets of the West Bank, while Israel wants to take advantage of cheap real estate and move in. So 200,000 Israelis are specifically in East Jerusalem, which Jerusalem itself is deep into. It kind of cuts inward into the West Bank. It kind of creates a bulge within the West Bank. Now east of that would be definitely deep and would be definitely moving into the West Bank territory. So yeah, this is TRT World. That's a Turkish state media. Haaretz, which is the oldest Israeli newspaper, over 100 years old, and the National Herald, which is the National Herald India, which is an Indian news source. So I've got to ask, why, for the love of God, why are these the only? Why are these the first news sources that I can find reporting this information? I dig into some information about Israel and what's going on between Israel and the West Bank, and these are the news sources that I first find out about. That's particularly disappointing and frustrating that I have to find news sources from Israel itself, from India, from Turkey. Those are the news sources that are talking about this. Where are American media sources talking about this? Why aren't they talking about this? I'm sure that there are a handful out there, but you're not. But why are the first sources coming from Turkey, Israel, India? I could go on. If I continue to dig into this, I'm sure I could go on and find more. And again, I'm sure that there are some sources in the U.S. that are covering this, but not nearly enough. And it's certainly no one large and for any extended period and covering it in any extended way. No mainstream news source have I been able to find, because the ones that come up to me are these ones from a variety of other countries. Countries which have a variety of opinions about us and are on a questionable or opposing geopolitical side to the U.S. in our interests. So, our head is up their ass so far. Israel's that is. We can't see straight, it's just that it's terribly upsetting that this kind of thing can go on, and that Trump gave them the red light, or that Trump basically gave Netanyahu the green light for this. There's a reason why over 70% of Israelis backed Donald Trump in this last election, as in a great majority of Israelis preferred Donald Trump, and it's no surprise. And it's yet to see how Biden will stand up against Israel, but the media in our country, at the very least, clearly isn't, and yet we continue to fund Israel and be complicit in what they do, and we pass state laws, federal laws, anti-BDS laws that make it harder and harder to criticize Israel. So this problem isn't going away anytime soon, and it's a damn shame. All right, thank you guys.